Good day, all. Today is February 16th, 2021. I am your instructor, Omari Dyson, and today we're going to talk a little bit, just putting things together in regards to your course on violence, and just talking about some definitions and going over some of the readings. Thank you all for your discussions. They've been very insightful. I've now been very slow with grading them, but it becomes very difficult when you have to grade about 25 students across 3 classes that are all submitting about 2 pages each, that they're supposed to submit 2 pages each, and you have to read through all of them. So I take time with reviewing your pieces, and I'm not providing feedback, but I do provide feedback when need be. But I'm very impressed with what I've seen thus far. So continue the good work. Moving along, before we begin, let's take a few seconds just to clear our minds and, reflect on our presence, where we are. Think about the people who've got us to where we are, who sacrificed themselves to give us the opportunity to be where we are. So let's just take that moment and engage. Good. Thank you all. So lots been going on in the news. I know some of you all have seen recently that Donald Trump was acquitted of the January 6th insurrection. So that's a very interesting conversation. I look forward to seeing if anyone is deciding to do any research on that. I think 1 or 2 people decide to want to explore that research topic. But I want to put that, not only that, but also other pieces that we've seen, not only recently in the context of violence, but also just historically, and this is a continuation of our last discussion in regards to the violence that's rooted in the fabrics of the nation. Now, when you look at going back to Johan Gultang's piece on the culture of violence, you understand that he breaks violence down into 3 areas, 3 categories, direct violence, cultural violence, and structural violence. And a lot of my attention really focuses on the structural aspects of violence, in the sense that if violence has been embedded in the fabrics of your nation, the foundation of your nation is built on violence. That means that whatever is a outgrowth of that is going to have some form of violence embedded in it. So when we have this discussion about whether or not violence is something that's biological or something that is that you're socialized to be, it's very difficult to understand that, because when you look at somebody from a biological aspect, genetically, when you're looking at people who've been predisposed to aspects of violence, and that's something that's passed down genetically, in the sense of when you think of stress, and this is something that I wanted to research many years ago, when we talked about fetal alcohol syndrome. And one day I was in a class, like graduate level class, and the teacher, we were talking about fetal alcohol syndrome and how if a mother were to consume alcohol or use any forms of drugs, harmful, illegal drugs, that would be passed into the child and have these negative influences on the developing child. So I asked the question, I said, well, what impact would depression or stress, some kind of psychological factors or forces have on a developing child? And I got nothing but silence. And I didn't realize that I might have been onto something until, and you guys are going to see this video later, the stress, the portrait of a killer, in looking and understanding of how much impact depression has. But before we think about the depression, think about the conditions that have led to one's depression. Hold on, let me shift this light. Might be a little bit too bright. Yeah. When we think about the conditions that contribute to depressed or stressful situations, is that something that we need to explore more in order to rid society of these forces that are hindering people from being their full selves and true selves. So that's one of the areas that I've focused my attention on. But anyway, when you look at these going back to Gultang, when you see it, you don't see the structural aspects of it. You just know that it's there. These events, the direct aspect that you saw a few weeks ago, or last month, I should say, with the quote unquote insurrection at the Capitol, people have said, well, how is it that Bill Clinton, he was able to, that there was deliberated for a much longer time for what he did with Monica Lewinsky. And, he was impeached for that act that he did. But Donald Trump, who did this act in regards to insurrection, et cetera, and the policies and laws that he established, he doesn't go down for that. And that's something for you guys to sit back and explore next year when we have elections again for Senate and Senate representatives, and also looking forward towards 4 more years in regards to the presidential election. This is nothing new. This is America. You shouldn't be surprised by these acts that have happened. It should just reinforce what you already know in regards to where we are. And that points to these 5 faces of oppression. Let's look at this. They're very good pieces, but what's exposed is this notion of exploitation. When one prevents their own group. Okay, so I have to distinguish between these terms. So exploitation, and you'll see it as cultural imperialism, but I call it colonization. But looking at how forms of oppression are, how they look when we see this manifest itself in a particular society. When we think about exploitation, we think about how an individual's value or a person is devalued when they are in a particular context by someone else. Usually exploitation is usually you do something for someone in your same group or same culture. Colonization is usually a larger, stronger force or group of people that impose their beliefs and standards on another group, and then create their norm, create their realities and their cultural practices as the norm, as the way it's supposed to be. And I think I talked a little bit about this with you all in regards to language and an aspect of writing. When we think about people who come from a particular social place, in regards to whether it be from a low income community, they come from a certain racial group, etc., and they are confronted with how to write or how to speak, and then their way of doing their act or how they express themselves is not received within the dominant culture. And is that some form of cultural imperialism that we see embedded in language? It was James Baldwin that said that once you open your mouth, it is your culture that comes out of it. So it's like, what are we saying when a certain group of people is not able to use their language or be their true self within a particular context? Case in point, some people may have heard of Black people who do code switching, all right? So for example, when, stereotypically speaking, Black person could be, living, amongst themselves, chilling in the quote unquote hood, and they, yo, what's up, dog? How you doing? I'm chilling, whatever, blah, 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 etc. Then a white man comes along, they'll be like, yes, I'm doing very well today. I feel as though the sun is shining, and I believe that today is going to be a great day. And so you see this difference that begins to exist, this notion of code switching. You act one way here and act another way there. I got into a conversation the other day and I said, the mere fact that a person has to code switch shows and illustrates that you cannot be your true self when you come into a particular context That's not necessarily an issue with the individual. That's an aspect or a problem with the culture. And that goes into this whole conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What do all these concepts mean if you cannot be your true self when you come to a particular table? All right. Another piece that comes from that read is the notion of marginalization. Now, this is very interesting for some people who are readers of the Black Panther Party and also of Karl Marx. Actually, we'll take Karl Marx first and then pull that, we'll shift that into works by Black Panther Party members, mainly Huey P. Newton. So for Karl Marx, the notion of marginalization was you have this, the haves and the have-nots. Those who have own the means of exploitation, the means of houses, of labor, etc. And they set the stage for how other people are going to respond. For the have-nots, they're the ones that are working and they're trying to achieve a particular goal, etc., etc. The goal under Marxist theory was that once the proletariat, right, versus the bourgeoisie, once the proletariat gain class consciousness or understanding of their social surroundings, they will fight back, all right, and begin to want the true essence or true what's the word I'm looking for, the true force or the true worth of what they're doing. They want the full aspect of labor, you know, to be paid fully for what they're actually doing. All right. The aspects of exploitation is that if you know that a job is worth $15 an hour, okay, but you pay that person $7.50 an hour, that's a form of exploitation. But it's also how you begin to push and marginalize these individuals to a certain class in society, because they're not able to come up based on how they're being treated. Now, Marx also talked about this group called the lumpen proletariat. Now, the lumpen proletariat was a group that Karl Marx believed there's nothing that can be done with these people. These are the peoples that are been pushed to the far ends of society. This is how we would call the pimps, the hustlers, the thieves, the prostitutes, etc. They're worth nothing. They can do no good. But Marx was challenged by two people in particular, Franz Fanon and also Huey P. Newton. Franz Fanon theoretically believed that these individuals harnessed some degree of power in society because they've been pushed to these limits. All right. However, how can we use these people in a particular way if we were to provide them with class consciousness and understanding? Huey P. Newton was the person that came in and did that. And he took those lumpens and began to educate those people about society and class structure and class relationships, et cetera, et cetera. But what was understood was that the lumpen proletariats were the most dangerous aspects of society, because since they were pushed and relegated to these positions or marginalized, they had nothing to lose. And if they have nothing to lose, that's the most dangerous soldier that you have in a fight against oppression. More to come there. Now, when we think about and progress with, so those lumpen proletariats can lay the foundation to a powerful force when used and when taught properly, can become a very powerful force in overcoming or overthrowing an exploitative and oppressive and colonial system. All right. Now, another piece, and this is, I have a problem with this a little bit, but the notion of powerlessness. Powerlessness, I don't believe that any person is powerless. I just believe that that person has not been pushed to the limit in regards to the point where they resist those powers that are or the forces that are holding them back. Also, they may be finding other ways to react to a oppressive system that we may not be conscious of. So for example, I gave you an example of Michael Jackson. I believe that this class I gave the example of Michael Jackson, who was pushed to a limit. And as he was pushed to the limit as a child, we'll call it child abuse, all right, is pushed to the limit and has no control of these conditions. But in the process of being pushed cornered into these conditions, brings out this character, this talent, this form of expression that will probably never be matched again, not in my lifetime. All right. So, something came out of that. This notion of powerlessness came out a form of empowerment. All right. And through that, you have this energy that's brought out to spread to the world. But the other aspect that's dangerous in powerlessness is when that powerlessness is not honed to a positive energy, but can also be used as a form of, that can retard an individual from growth. And they use that powerlessness begins to consume them, and they find themselves doing certain behaviors in order to further harm themselves. This is what Huey P. Newton called the reactionary suicide, where an individual or group is not able to fight the powers that be. And in turn, they begin to internalize that rage and begin to, not only with stress, depression, etc., begin to wear away within, but also begin to take certain forms of self-medication in order to heal themselves or increase their sense of I guess, hope, if you will, to take away the form of pain. You self-medicate yourself, i.e. you use drugs, etc., etc. All right. I had a friend that used to study drug culture, right, specifically marijuana, and I was, didn't understand it at the time, but he looked at the use of marijuana. This is like 15 years ago. Use of marijuana as a form of resistance culture, that people are using this form of drug. And remember, drugs have gotten or became illegal based on some kind of usually linked to racism. And there's a piece called Hooked, Illegal Drugs and How They Got That Way. And you can look at that piece to look at how certain drugs have been used and exploited through time and became illegal based on racism. All right. So anyway, marijuana was one way of controlling specifically Mexican people. All right. So, but anyway, in regards to how this situation plays out, people use drugs to marijuana or whatever to enlighten themselves. Okay. Never was an illegal drug. It's from the earth. I mean, my mom's from Jamaica. Cannabis was a part of the earth. You just throw a seed and it grows up. It's kind of like the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. That's how it was. But for some reason, it's become a threat. But now all of a sudden it's popular. I mean, look at cannabis stocks are going through the roof now. But anyway, North Carolina is probably going to be the last on the list. But nonetheless, moving forward. So anyway, with people, when we think of this aspect of drug culture is another form of reaction to a larger system. And people are using these drugs in order to deal and cope with an oppressive system. Let's look at what we are. Let's look at the foundation of what creates people and makes us who we are. All right. Another piece that comes out of this, and is the aspect of violence, is when an individual becomes so powerless, where they find as though they've been cornered and they have nowhere else to turn, and their anger, rather than the internalized rage that consumes, or the use of, reframing that powerlessness and becoming something enlightened, there's also the other aspect where what brings us together is using that energy as a form of violence, which is the direct violence that's targeted at a particular individual or a particular group. Okay. That's the scary part. I go back to, I sent y'all a video, and if not, you can look this up. But the shovel, in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, where the family was killed over quote unquote somebody shoveling snow. They were shoveling snow into somebody's yard. All right, let's take a pause for a second and let's look at this and analyze the situation. All right, what do you think? What is it really about snow? Are you willing to die for snow? That's a question that we have to think about. I don't know the story fully, but I know that whatever pushed this individual to the point where he got so angry, so upset, so disappointed, I don't know, that he can shoot someone over quote unquote snow, that's something to think about. All right. So all I know is that the history was that they had this beef. All right. For those that don't know, beef is a battle, a competition over snow shoveling, snow being shoveled into their yard. Now, for those people that are from states that had a lot of snow, you understand how stressful it is and how much work it takes to shovel snow, clean out your doggone driveway or your parking space, and then someone comes and throws that snow back in. You're taking away time, you're taking away labor. In some cases, if you've paid money for somebody to clean your driveway, and somebody else comes and does and throws that snow in there, you're talking about money. So labor, money, time. Okay. Don't play with those three things. I'm just using this based on what I saw. All right. And it's happening consistently over and over again. Now, we don't know what's going on in the mind of people. You can't see people's mind to understand whether or not there's some kind of mental imbalance that exists, that there can be some historical forms of PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder. We don't know if that's there. We don't know if this person has grown up. We don't know any of that information. All we have is a video. And we know that these people are arguing. I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to bop you up. I'm blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. They going in and they're going in. They're going hard. So my man says, okay, I'll be back. Now, for those people that, I'm speaking my age here, but when I used to go to the club and there was something that popped off like that, and a guy says, all right, F this. I'm out. I'll be back. That usually was a warning sign for us to say, hey, man, I think it's time for us to get out of here. All right. He does that. He walks away. These days, we don't know what people have as far as weapons, etc., and what people are capable of, especially when you push them into a corner. And this is the thing that I try to explain to people when you continually push somebody, push and keep pushing somebody down. This is why oppression is so dangerous. This is why this country is so in such a dangerous, in a very precarious situation. Because even Malcolm X talked about this in regards to Black people in this country being the powder keg that's in the middle of your living room waiting to explode. And you keep pushing and pushing and pushing down on somebody. You don't know when that moment's going to be. So guess what? He goes into the house, he comes out and he starts shooting. Shoots her, shoots him. He doesn't give a damn. All right? After he shoots him, you think, okay. Now, I'm watching this and I'm just like, you ain't coming back from that because you can't explain this. Okay? You're going to prison for this. This is clear. You got evidence all against you. So what does he do? He goes in the house. You think it's over. Guess what? He comes right outside with a freaking shotgun. Boom, boom, knocks him out. Dead. 15-year-old child looking at his parents get killed right there in the house. He's watching his parents get killed. Okay? Can't do anything. Think about the life that child now has to live. Guy takes his gun, goes back in the house, kills himself. Real. Let me give you an example of something that happened to me. Almost happened to me. Well, I should say happened to me this weekend, Saturday. I'm out here walking my dog, all right? It was raining, freezing rain outside, cold. I'm walking, just walking, and the dog happens to want a stool. So I'm like, oh man, forgot my bags, right? My baggies. My neighborhood says, hey, clean up after your dog. I mean, that's respect, clean up after your dog. So I'm looking for some baggies, and I look and I see a newspaper, a wet newspaper in a plastic bag on the ground. So I run, grab that newspaper, pull the newspaper out the bag, take the newspaper, and I didn't really want to do this, but I took the newspaper and I walked in the corner, the side of a person's house, you know, threw the newspaper. It was in his front yard, threw this newspaper away in the garbage, got the baggie, and continued to walk with the dog until he stooled. He stooled, picked it up, and I threw it in another garbage can. Kept walking, didn't think anything of it. As I'm walking back past the house that I threw the newspaper in, I'm walking, I said, see the guy, he has his garage open. I said, hey, how you doing? He says, hey, man, hey, did you throw dog poop in my yard, in my garbage can? And I was like, no, I just threw the newspaper in there. I just needed a plastic bag. He's like, oh, okay. And I just kept walking. And I thought about that for a second. And I said, if I would have threw the shit into his garbage can, and as a note, shit is not necessarily a derogatory term. As it was told to me, shit is actually an acronym that stands for ship, high, and transfer. And apparently when people were shipping manure, the goal was not to let the manure fall into the bottom parts of the ship, because if it was interacting with water, it would start to smell. So they would ship it high and transfer. And instead of just saying the whole word ship, high, and transfer, they used the word shit. But over time, the word has become a little bit derogatory. So I do apologize if I created any stress in any of your hearts or your ears. My due apologies for that. I did not mean to do that. Moving forward. So as I thought about the stool, and I says, wow, what if I did throw the stool into his garbage can? Would have popped off on me, or, you know, got angry at me? All the issues that we're dealing with in society, and we about to fight over stool. Now, people get upset because the stool is left in the yard. I thought I was doing a good deed by, you know, not littering, by picking up your newspaper that you didn't pick up, throwing it away, and then using the plastic bag to do a good deed and not leave manure in front of your yard. All right. But nothing popped off. But just the mere thought of it was just like, I'm about to die over some shit. And that's what you guys have to think about, is how oppressed is a group of people that they're willing to fight and even die for something you think is so simple. Back in the day, somebody steps on my Nikes and I'm willing to fight for my Nikes. Somebody brushes against me in the club and I'm like, yo, dog, I'm ready to fight this person because he brushed against me in the club. You're dancing, boom, 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 boom. Well, back in the day when you could dance in the club, boom, 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 you dancing. Somebody's walking with a bear, you know, and you clearly see it's a dance floor. You dancing, boom, somebody hits you, right? He inadvertently hits you. Your bear spills. You ready to fight. Like, is this what we've been relegated to? That a group of people has become so marginalized where meaning, like a hat, this thing right here, right? A little flimsy hat, $5.99 hat, I'm willing to fight and die for it, okay? That's when we talk about the dangers of marginalization, that people have been pushed to the ends of society, and that these little things that we think of as symbolic interactionism is the term, all right, is that we establish meaning to something, and the meaning that we attach to something is so important that we're willing to die for it. Think about that for a second. I'm willing to die for snow. I'm going to take someone's life and my life for snow, versus using your peace and conflict skills to negotiate, to communicate, to understand, instead of resorting to violence to do that. Maybe if we are a society of people that can be fully human, maybe we could be, going back to last week's discussion, I am care, and be able to take that word care and infuse love and the word power and put all these things together and come together as human beings. But unfortunately, we can't do that because the structure of this society is violent. And if we continue to see these little things happen in society, we know it's linked to one thing. How do we do this? We have to go to the source of what makes us who we are. One, fix ourselves and looking at imbalances that have occurred in our lives and abuses that have occurred in our life, to find a way to heal from it, to make peace with our parents for beating us when we were young, to make peace, go to counseling. And then once we find and heal ourselves, we come together as groups and find a way to heal with each other, to make do and address the imbalances that have harmed people. And until we're able to come together as a human family to address the harm that we've inflicted on people, whether it be today, 2 hours ago, 526 years ago, I don't care. It has to be addressed. And until it's addressed, we're going to continue to see the madness we see out here in this society. I wish you all the best. Please let me know if you need anything, any form of support. I'll try my best to work with you guys in the process. I hope your families are safe. And please don't do anything crazy, because these COVID situation is still running wild. They're saying that in the United States, they've detected about 6 or 7 new variants. So please be safe out there. Mask up. Continue to use social distancing. Just be very safe and be careful. I wish you all the best.